Hi and welcome to another episode of Nattabox, which, as you know, is the podcast where I like to talk to lots of inspirational people from the world of music and entertainment, sports, business and health and well-being. And this particular episode today I thought was one that was going to be really important to touch upon, because I have a fantastic, not just a fellow colleague of mine from the BBC, but someone that I definitely consider a friend after over 5 years. And Steve Hermon is a sports journalist for BBC Radio WM. I've known him for a number of years now, and as well as being exceptionally good at what he does, he also has a couple of beautiful children, one of whom is his 9-year-old son Eddie, who has autism but also has a speech disorder associated with autism. So because I know there's a lot of parents out there who are dealing with children either with autism or with some kind of disabilities or learning disabilities and difficulties, I thought it was something that would be a good topic of conversation to touch upon. So I would like to welcome the fabulous Steve Hermon. How are you?
Thank you very much. That's the first time I've been called fabulous.
You are always fabulous, always fabulous. It's great to have you on board, and nice to sort of, I suppose, have a conversation outside of work. And before we sort of go into the ins and outs of sort of fatherhood and parenthood, especially when dealing with a child who has autism, just give us a bit of background about yourselves, because obviously you deal with the sports journalism side of things, but how did you get into it all?
So my first experience of radio was my dad taking me around lots of different radio stations, because he worked as a music promoter for Sony Music for 30 years.
Oh, wow, okay.
So he his claim to fame is that he took Michael Jackson on his one and only regional radio tour in Birmingham. But he's worked with lots of different people. Yep. So he used to take me sometimes to these radio stations. So I got into radio that way. And then fast forward, did media GMVQ at college, at Stourbridge College. Kick FM, which is still going now. Kick Radio, Kids in Communication, it stands for. It's based in Wolverhampton. Yep. That was my first experience of radio. And fast forward to current days, I've been at the BBC for 11 years after doing 8.5 years in commercial radio. And now work as a sports journalist, mainly commentating on the football for BBC Radio WM, and loving it, yeah.
Well, I've obviously growing up in the music industry and everything myself. I think there's certain interviews that my mom had way back in the day, and magazines. There's sort of, when they've asked me when I was sort of 6 or 7, what do you want to be when you're older? And I think one of the things I said, I'd love to be a TV presenter and present. I think it was The Tube or something I said at that stage. But I think music and that side of things has always been in my blood. So did you know, whilst you were travelling with your dad, did you instantly feel some kind of affinity to radio and think, do you know what, I would love to do this when I'm older?
Yeah, I think for me, radio as a medium,
Yeah.
I still insist that, it's one of the best, because it has an extra layer of emotions. You've got to paint a picture, that certainly from a football commentary perspective, I've got to paint a picture and bring across that emotions. I think football commentary on the radio can create goosebumps moments much better than watching it on TV, but I'm very biased when I say that. But in terms of going to those radio stations, I was just always fascinated with the radio side. As you said, my dad worked in the music industry, but we're also a football mad family,
right?
And so I think mesh the two, football mad family with the radio, and like I said, I'm in my dream job now.
I mean, as you've said that as well, who's your team?
Wolves.
And who is it you have to commentate on?
I commentate on West Bromwich Albion.
Brilliant. How did you feel when they dropped that one on you?
I was fine, to be honest, because so Rob Gurney was the previous commentator.
Yeah.
He left to join our colleagues at BBC CWR. And I'd worked before with Tony Bomber Brown, who's the pundit. He's an Albion legend, record appearance holder, record goal scorer. I'd worked with him before and had a lot of fun, so I was well up for the challenge. And like I said, football commentary is my dream job.
Is that what you always wanted to do?
Yes. Yeah, that is always what I've wanted to do. So sort of like my year 10 work experience that you always had to do at school, I did it a 2-week placement in the BBC Radio WM Sports Department.
Wow.
So 25 years later,
full circle.
Exactly. Yeah, I'd have liked it to not have been that long, but it's worth the wait. So yeah, in terms of being a Wolves fan commentating on the Albion, I don't shout about it in terms of being a Wolves fan who commentates on the Albion, but I'm also, if people ask me about it, I'm honest about it. I'm not going to hide that fact.
Well, I didn't even know that I knew obviously you like sports, and when I first met you, it was mainly the news. It's sort of, I'd hand over to you and sort of say, right, now you've got the 6 o'clock news with Steve Hermon and whatever.
With the latest BBC News for the West Midlands, I'm Steve Hermon.
There we go, beautiful. How beautiful that you've got the voice and the face though. Not for radio. That sounds really bad. I didn't mean it like that.
Not the first time that's been said. It's fine.
But I didn't realise that all that time. I just thought that obviously news was your sort of main area, and that's what you wanted to do. So I feel even more elated for you now, the fact that you've had the opportunity to have your dream job.
Yeah.
And does your sister do some sports commentary as well?
Yeah, so my sister played for Wolves Women for 20 plus years.
Did she?
Yeah. I don't like to say it, but she was probably a better footballer than me. But she played. That's why I played in goal, because she was a better footballer than me, you see.
Right.
So I played in goal because she was a better outfield player. But yeah, she played for Wolves Women for 20 years, PE teacher for a long time as well. Now, in the last couple of years, she started working for the club down at Compton at Wolves, behind the scenes in the academy setup.
Anyone that people who follow Wolves women football team would remember the name?
Of my sister, Claire Hermon, or Claire Hakeman, as she is now, her married name. But they might do, I'm sure. And she now does co-commentary for the club, but also for us at BBC Radio WM.
And she's done a bit with you?
We've done one game together. Wolves at Manchester City the season before last, when Wolves lost and Haaland scored a hat-trick. So it wasn't a great day from a Wolves perspective, but it was it was a bizarre afternoon sort of working with my sister. But
how did it feel?
It was all right. We kind of just sort of slyly mentioned it at the start, but kind of just treated it as, I'm a commentator, she's a pundit. It just happened to be that we're brother and sister. It was strange it's more strange for our family members, I think, than it was for us.
And probably a sense of huge pride for the family as well, to think, oh, my kids, listen, they're there together.
I think my mum and dad like that. Yeah.
Apart from the fact, obviously, they didn't get the result that they would have wanted.
No,
I'm assuming they're Wolves fans as well.
Yeah, they
through
are.
And through. Well, again, I've already sort of said to you before we sort of went live with all this that I'm really, really grateful for you coming on today. And it's only through sort of getting to know you at work that I came to find out, obviously, that you've got 2 beautiful children, and one of whom, your son, who has autism. And there was one of the days, because I used to do my sort of Tasty Tuesdays, my Wellness Wednesdays on the Wednesday evenings, and I mentioned to you at one stage, I was like, Steve, is there any chance, I can't remember if it was sort of Autism Awareness Week or something to fall in line with that. I said, Steve, is there any chance you would mind coming on to sort of have a little chat about it? And I think it was tied in with when you were just signing up to do a 10K and you just started your journey of never having been a runner before and sort of pulled out some running shoes and thought, right, I'm going to do this for a to help to raise awareness. But when I asked you and said, would you mind talking? You're like, me? What do you want me to come on Wellness Wednesday for? But like I said, it's a topic that I think so many more people are impacted by than what any of us actually realise. I don't know sort of specific stats and facts and figures for the UK. Liam's going to get typing away at some stage. Thanks, Liam. Just to find out what some of the stats are within this country. But can you just talk us through, I suppose, your journey of parenthood itself, but also how it's been for you as the father of a child with autism?
Yeah, tough. It's something that you don't expect to be thrown at you. You expect the sort of normal journey of having a child and having a child, and they, go on to do the usual things. They go to school, they get their GCSEs, they go on to have a career, get married, all that sort of jazz, and it just throws a bit of a curveball, really, at life. So we've got a daughter, Isla, who's almost 11, and she's brilliant, really funny, really entertaining, very dramatic and lively and bubbly. And then we've got Eddie, who's 9, and his kind of needs started to emerge just before his second birthday.
Right.
And yeah, because you tend to compare when you've got the two kids, you compare to the other one. So you go, well, he's not hitting these milestones as soon as Isla was.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the first
Is it
inkling.
like walking, talking, or...
Ironically, the physical milestones, he was quicker. So he was ahead. And I think I remember us saying, he's climbing quicker, he's walking quicker, and that sort of thing. But the speech never sort of came. And so just before his second birthday, obviously, on 2 years, you tend to get another home visit and a check to see if everything's okay. But we rang ahead and said, look, he's still not speaking. He's kind of only just babbling. And so that kind of started the process. And it's just an absolute whirlwind, to be honest with you. No one gives you a handbook for having a child with special needs. But as also at that time, we still didn't know we had a child with special needs. You know, he's not even 2 yet. So there are still certain milestones to come. But yeah, we referred him to the health worker. We got referred to the speech and language therapy unit. And the first thing they did, and I think that this is pretty standard, the first thing they did was do a hearing test.
Right.
To see if, he's not responding or not speaking because he can't hear and his hearing is not too good. But we said, to be honest, we think he'll be fine because he can hear a packet of crisps open from a mile away. So we were pretty confident that wasn't a problem, and it wasn't. It was fine. So then you go on to the next step, and obviously they hand out leaflets, and you have conversations, and you have someone from the speech and language therapy team come and just do a check on them and see how they are. Fast forward to it came time to go to nursery. We wanted him to go to a mainstream nursery. Yeah. There was the option of a special needs nursery at that time, but I think we were kind of partly unsure, partly being honest, probably not accepting it yet. Okay. Because it's quite a tough, like I said, it's not the path you expect to go down. So I think part of us were. I'm only speaking from my own perspective than my wife, but partly in denial, perhaps, that no, we haven't got a child with special needs. We want to go down the mainstream route and see how he copes, see how he gets on. So he went to the same nursery that our daughter did, and immediately, as soon as he was in that classroom, that was where, just straight away, I knew.
Really?
Yeah, because you saw him amongst his peers, effectively. Because I think when he was at home and he's just with us as a family of four, Eddie's just Eddie. You know, it's he is who he is, and we coped with it, dealt with it, and not in a difficult way or a bad way. To be honest, it was what it was. But as soon as he entered the nursery classroom amongst other children, I think in that first week, I remember the school nursery teacher coming to us and saying, "Do you think there's something?" Okay. And immediately I said yes, because you could see it straight away. And to be fair, the school were really good. They sort of referred us on again to the right people. And he stayed, and they made sure he had one-to-one support for the rest of his time there. Okay. They were very good. And it was really appreciated. They actually brought in a one-to-one support, this nursery assistant who we're still in touch with now, who she knows Makaton Sign Language. Right. So it's not British Sign Language is a language in itself. Makaton Sign Language is... it's a form of that, right. But it's quite very basic. It's a bit like Makaton Sign Language is a bit like if I asked you to do the sign for a giraffe or something like that, you could probably guess what it is. Which is... I'm
not even going to embarrass myself. What my brain is thinking, what would I do?
Giraffe is that. That's, there you go. Giraffe.
Okay.
Long neck and there. Probably not the best example, but you could kind of have a guess with lots of things.
Is it almost like a dialect of? I know that sounds fun, but you can kind of get. I've heard you can get like dialects of sign language.
Yeah, I guess it's a spin-off. Yeah,
Right.
it's a spin-off from British Sign Language, and a lot of them are the same.
Right.
But anyway, so this nursery assistant, she was trained in Makaton, and I've still got the video on my phone now. We were sat at home, and we were doing a few symbols with him, and he started to respond and say the words of like a cow, a car, and lots of other things. And honestly, it was the most amazing feeling in the world. He was like, he wasn't even 3 at that point, I think.
Had you been told at this point that it was unlikely that he'd be able to speak?
No one we hadn't had that conversation yet. I don't think
Right.
anyone was brave enough perhaps to tell us that was a possibility at that point. We just knew ourselves that, his speech wasn't coming, especially, when he was getting on to 3 years old.
Yeah.
You're thinking, but yeah. So anyway, went to nursery, and we were really grateful for the support that we had. He then went on to special school, but to get to a special school, you need something called an EHCP, an Education, Health and Care Plan. Previously, a couple of years, it was called a statement. Kids were statemented. They changed it to EHCP, and I think it's probably more of a friendly term. But it also sets out what it is. It's a plan for their education, for their health and their care. And once a child has that, they have that up until the age of 25.
Wow, okay.
And we have to have a review every year of this plan to make sure that it's the right plan for Eddie. Now, I have to admit, we didn't focus too much on the first one because they just tell you, just get one. Get
Right.
one because it's effectively your pass to get into a
get
special
into the
school.
school.
Yeah.
And what, without that, then basically they just can't accept you?
Effectively, yeah. If you haven't got one of these plans, then yeah, they don't, because as part of the plan comes a lot of funding.
Yeah.
It has to fund their care. You're effectively putting a price tag on their heads, really.
Wow, okay.
And the school use that money to fund the care that they need. Although I think, to be honest, it probably goes into just a large pot and just helps to fund the whole school rather than the individual care needs. But that's that's a story for another day. I think I keep using the word whirlwind, and that's what it is, because no one gives you a handbook.
Yeah.
No one tells you all these different things. There are all these sections to this EHCP plan, sections A to F, and they all mean different things, but no one tells you what they mean, and you're just expected to kind of figure out what they mean, and you end up sort of meeting other parents and kind of figuring it out together.
Is that more so where the knowledge then comes from, is people who are in similar shoes to yourself, as opposed to the experts?
Yeah, I think, amongst parents, you kind of develop a bit of a community. And there's a massive community out there.
Yeah.
I think you said it at the start, that there are more people out there than people realise, and there are more people with certainly a wide range of needs. Obviously, I'm just talking about autism and speech and language issues, but there are so many different disabilities out there. We do say to ourselves, me and Kate do say to ourselves, that our situation could be a lot worse.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we'd love Eddie to be able to speak fluently and have a conversation with us. We're still not at that stage, and that's still something that I kind of struggle with, because I hear people saying, I heard someone say on the radio the other day about, it's one of the, it was walk to school week last week, and they were saying, one of the things I like to do is pick up my child and we walk home, and that's when you have the best conversations, isn't it? And it's like,
The simplest things that can almost not be a trigger.
yeah. And it's like, I can't have a conversation with him. Like I take him to and from school most days, and don't get me wrong, he's happy as Larry. He's just sitting there and he's having a great time. Most of the time, just eating, like fruit and veg and stuff. Big eater, but a very healthy eater, in fairness.
Good to hear.
Yeah. But I don't have a conversation with him. He'll say the occasional word if it's prompted.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard.
Just just to come back to your wife as well, sort of rewinding slightly from when you first received that sort of diagnosis, even potentially before Eddie went to nursery. How was that for you as a couple? Is this something that you were almost forced to process together, or did you deal with it individually? Because I know that there's a lot of people, when it comes to being in these situations, that this can have a massive impact on people's relationships.
It's never had an impact on our relationship, but I think in terms of how it was processed, we definitely processed it in different ways.
Right.
I think Kate
was she more accepting?
Perhaps she accepted it quicker.
Right.
I would say. Yeah. I think she accepted it sooner. And she was very good at being proactive, at ringing the local council to ask where's the EHCP plan, because it doesn't take...
That's where you have to get it from then, through the council?
Yeah, it's a thing that's referred through the council. They deal with it. And it can still be a nightmare every year. It's not a fun process,
right.
Particularly if you try and challenge something that's in it and try and get better support. It's a whole other battle, which I can talk about later if you like. But yeah, in terms of the early stages, Kate was just very proactive, head on, like, this is what we need, let's go do it. I went down the other route of kind of campaigning and trying to find out more about, because the thing that got to be in my bonnet was about the lack of access to speech and language therapy. That was my big thing, because Eddie from the NHS up until recently only had a half an hour block of therapy in his lifetime.
Up until what? Till the age of 9 now?
Yeah. He had half an hour's worth of therapy from the NHS, because they don't. That's not really what they offer, and they haven't got the resources to offer more. Because in the Dudley area alone, which is where we are, in the Dudley area alone, I know for a fact, because I was sad enough to put freedom of information requests in to get it. There were 4,000 plus children, just children, on their caseload, because speech and language therapy, it is from childhood to adults. There's things like dysphagia, which I think Bruce Willis is going through. Chris Kamara, he's gone through I think it's apraxia. People, when they have strokes, need speech and language therapy. But in terms of just children, it's in the Dudley area alone, you're talking 4,000 plus children that they got on their caseload. And it's a very small team of people. So I can kind of understand why they don't offer the therapy, but I think...
You shouldn't have to fight for it as much as you have.
No. And I think the blunt conversations I had with the local speech therapy team and lots of other speech therapists around the country as a result of conversations was, look, I'm not fighting against you. Yeah. I'm trying to help...
You're fighting
you.
for.
Yeah. I'm trying to help you get more resources and get more funding, because clearly you don't have enough. So that was kind of, at that time, that's what occupied my mind. While Kate was kind of sorting out the EHCP plan and the logistics and that, I went down a complete other route and kind of got myself down a bit of a rabbit hole, to be honest with you.
Would you say that there's a lot of other parents that have done similar? Or are you one of these that's sort of at the flying the flag for it? Have you sort of started to recognise that there's people in similar situations to yourself and you've almost become a little bit of a spokesperson for, or is it still just the individual case, but you know that if you can do something for Eddie, that it can have an impact for others?
Yeah, that was my mindset. Was selfishly, obviously, I want to get this help for Eddie, but it's not right for other children. I've had conversation with politicians about this, and I've spoken at parliamentary meetings and with Speech and Language UK. I spoke at a forum that they held, and the Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists. I've spoken at various different events. I've spoken to students at the Birmingham City University who are studying to be speech and language therapists about how to approach things. I remember, so during because one of the things that can frustrate you is the way that people speak to you when you've got a child with special needs. And I always stress with the students that I speak to is the importance of empathy and understanding that there are people going through something that they're still adjusting to, particularly in the early stages. I mean, one of the most galling conversations I had was with a former head of a speech and language therapy service. We had I had a Zoom meeting with them during the pandemic because basically, so Eddie started school at his special school September 2019. So obviously,
of course, and then
lockdown happened. So it was really bad timing with his first special school, but bad timing for everybody. But the most galling thing was we had a conversation with the speech and language therapist in the October about a report, and that was the last time we heard from them. And we never heard from them from the March until July, when there was a letter basically saying, "How is everybody? Is everyone okay?" And it's like, well, could have done with that sort of. There was more to it than that, but that was the gist of it. And he was like, well, could have done with her hearing from you a few months ago, you know, where was, we were at home. If you could have sent us some resources, we could have helped. I mean, we did our own thing. We did our own research and tried our best. My wife works in a school, so in a way, him being at home worked in his benefit. I think he actually came on quite well, being with us at home a little bit. But this Zoom conversation I had with the head of the speech and language therapy service at the time, the former head, there was two things that really annoyed me. She said, one of the things was, well, 30 years ago, we didn't work in schools. I was like, well, 30 years ago, I didn't do this, that, and the other in my industry, and what I'm doing. Times change, so that was the first thing. And then towards the end of the Zoom call, we were just having a conversation. She asked me, what did I do as a job? And I told her, I said, I work as a journalist for the BBC. And she went, are you recording this phone? Are you recording this? And she panicked, thinking that I was going to be using this call. I'm happy to tell the story now publicly because she's moved on. But I just couldn't believe it. I was like, are you that paranoid that... the mistrust of the job that I do, because I'm not that type of person, and you know that. But B, I said, I was like, I'm on this call as a parent.
Yes.
My job has
not as a journalist.
I could be a plumber, a baker, whatever, a butcher, baker, candlestick maker, whatever you want. It doesn't matter. Whatever my job is, doesn't matter in this conversation. I'm talking to you as a parent. And so, it's sort of things like that frustrate you, that you have to challenge. It does feel like sometimes barriers are put in parents' way, rather than being like, sometimes the system, rather than being set up to help people, it's set up to kind of
fail.
Well, just stop people in their tracks and halt people and challenge you. It's.
I mean, you mentioned as well that as sort of you've progressed, there's not just obviously forums, but there's groups and there's other parents that you're able to not compare, but who are in the same situation and have the same level of, you've used the word empathy, because they understand what each other's going through. So are these, again, similar frustrations to that? Were you finding that, hold on, this isn't just me that's coming across these obstacles?
Yeah. There's a massive community of people that are fighting these battles, and there are parent carer forums. I'm kind of admittedly a bit time player just for time constraints and work commitments, but I am part of the parent carer forum in Dudley. Mm-hmm. And there's a brilliant charity called We Love Carers, who I went to some of their early meetings, and that was really helpful. It was just helpful to, once you're introduced to, because I think when you first go through it, you think you're the only one going through it, and you're on your own. And just to divert really quickly, I remember it always sticks in my head. And on the way to here, I listened to it again. There was a protest, I remember, in Birmingham City Centre, and it was set up by parents and carers of special needs children, and they were protesting in Birmingham City Centre. It was kind of a national coordinated thing, but the regional one was in the middle of Birmingham. And I remember I was getting the train to work at that time, and there were lots of parents on the train there, and I heard them talking about it. And then it was weird because later on in the day, I was reading the news on BBC WM, and one of our colleagues had gone to the march and spoken to the organiser, and it was a woman called Katie Taylor, who I think she's got a grown-up child now with special needs. And I remember I used this clip in my news bulletin, and I've still got it to this day just because it resonated that much with me. And she said, when you first become a parent of a child with special needs, you go through a grieving process, and you grieve for the child that you thought you were going to have, because it is a different, it's like I said before, it's a totally different path. And she said, yeah, there is that grieving process, but you will go on an equally exciting, enjoyable, rewarding journey. Rewarding journey is what she described it as. And I needed to hear that at the time, because like I said, I was handling it in a different way to my wife Kate. But when I heard that clip, I was like, yeah, that's what's happening. That's what I'm doing. And also I'm probably feeling sorry for myself.
Right.
And it is a grieving process, and it's still there.
Yeah. It
is still there. You do still have those moments where you're just reminded that things are different, just in everyday conversations. But if I let it nag at me too much, that won't help. But yeah, that really helped at the time. I needed to hear that, and then you go back to what we were talking about, the empathy of other parents. That's when you start to realise I'm not the only one. So that feeling of feeling sorry for yourself kind of goes away a bit, because
you've got a more feeling of like a solidarity that I'm not in this on my own.
Yeah.
I think that's again one of the reasons I wanted to sort of talk about this today, as well, for some of the aspects that you've just mentioned, because there's going to be parents, and I mean I've got friends as well who have got older friends who've got children with autism, different sort of levels of. And I've had sort of in-depth conversations with some of them, and I know that at certain stages they've almost felt a sense of guilt because of how they've been feeling internally. And for anybody who is listening or watching now that, again, might have just recently received a diagnosis, might not have even had the official diagnosis, but can just tell that there's something, like you said, that's a little bit different, but they're having a sort of an internal battle because they feel those frustrations, they feel the guilt, they feel the grieving and the mourning, and it might be that they are being more hard on themselves than what they really need to be. Because from speaking with you, not just today, but obviously sort of over the years, it was kind of just being able to put across to people that it's okay to feel those emotions, and surely you just have to learn to ride with them as and when they come.
Yeah, because like I said, it's not a feeling that goes away, but yeah, I think that's why it being described as a grieving process is probably a perfect way of describing it, because, you know, when you do lose a loved one, that feeling of sadness, it doesn't go away, but you learn to manage it and you learn to park it. So yeah, if there is anyone who's watching this or listening to this, it's okay to feel like that. You know, don't feel guilty for feeling like that. But I think going back to Katie Taylor's quote, it was right, because you will go on a rewarding journey. Because ultimately, would I change Eddie? No, I wouldn't, because he is who he is.
Do you love to see the milestones then that he reaches, whether it's certain things that you didn't necessarily think he would ever be able to do or he would ever be able to say? Does that make certain experiences with him that much more special?
It's the best feeling in the world. Going back to when he was doing the Macathon and just saying those individual words, best feeling in the world. Now, so because of the situation with the NHS and the lack of access to therapy, we do have a private speech and language therapist. We're grateful for that because not everybody can afford that.
Yeah.
Full disclosure, we have disability living allowance. I'd rather not have it, to be honest with you. I'd rather the money that we take from that be put into the pot for the NHS, for them to fund the therapy properly over that way. So we're taking from that pot to fund private therapy.
Yeah.
And he has it every week and he loves it. He has a great time going. Mainly because I think she gives him sweets and biscuits and things, but he asks for the biscuits.
Right.
He'll say, "Want biscuit?" And he's now starting to put together words. We were having bath time the other day, and he's got like a squidgy dinosaur toy. And for a long time, if I said, "What's this?" he'd say dinosaur. But the other day, he said green dinosaur. And the fact that he put two words together, that's progress. It's baby steps, but it is a massive step for him. And so, it's the best feeling in the world because I'd like to think that me and Kate do work hard on it at home. We've got symbols all over the fridge, like these, they call them PEX symbols, picture exchange communication symbols. We've got them on the fridge of different food items and different things. We've got lots of sensory toys everywhere. And, we do work hard. It is like a second job.
Is he sensitive with sounds or anything, or is he okay on that front?
No, he doesn't need ear defenders or anything like that. He's fine. I think that's the minefield to widen this open even more. That's the minefield of autism. I was talking to Liam before about his brother and how he's high functioning clearly and clearly doing a brilliant job with what he does because he's using his unique skill, because I would call it a skill of his high functioning autism to help him with what he's doing. Eddie's at the other end of the scale where he's his needs are severe. As I say, as we've talked about, his communication needs are limited. It's getting better, but you can't have a conversation with him, but he knows his own mind. If you ask him to pick something up and put it in the bin, he can understand instructions. But in terms of communicating, he can ask for food items and he can point at animals and things. But he's got severe needs, and his thing is that he's very sensory.
Right.
So we bought him for his birthday, just gone, a spinner. And he had another spinner before, but broke it because he spun on it that much. And this one is quite a ferocious spinner.
For him, or is this like the fidget spinner thing?
No, not a fidget. Yeah, it's one that he gets on. One that he'll sit on it
and
literally just spin. And if you let him, he will spin all day and go really dizzy. On his birthday morning, he was sick.
Oh. Bless him.
Because he spun on it a bit too much. But he's very high sensory, loves spinning. There's a thing called, I didn't know, I'd heard the term used, but I didn't really know what it meant until a few years ago, of stimming. So if you see someone with autism, some people, they will stim, is what they call it. It might be, and it can come in different forms. So they might, Eddie will sometimes, he'll bounce around or flap his hands. And it's basically they're stimulating themselves. They're overstimulated, so they need to move to kind of regulate themselves. One of the things that he's got from the occupational therapist from the NHS, who they are very good. One of the things he's got is a brush. So we sometimes will brush his arm and his leg because it regulates the senses and it calms him down. Because otherwise he'd be bouncing off the walls, kind of a lot.
That sounds literally.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got. I think I mentioned this to you again at work, but one of my best friends, her daughter has. I think she's had certain checks, and my friend always knew that there was something a bit different. She's been surrounded by kids and sort of nieces and nephews and all that kind of stuff, and she could just tell that there was something different with her daughter. Beautiful and very intelligent, but there were certain things, it's just you turning around and say sort of sensory, buttons, anything that had buttons on it, she would have an absolute meltdown. And there's just certain things as she's gone along, and via some of the checks, I think, her dad is at the phase where he's like, there's nothing wrong with my child, she's fine. But then at school, when she first went to school, and she's in a mainstream school, when she first went to school, then the teachers had just sort of said, do you recognise that there might be something different with her? I think with her maths as well, she was struggling with her maths, and she really doesn't like school, but she enjoys it when she's there, but she just doesn't like school. So she got her a maths tutor, but she said she specifically didn't tell the maths tutor that there was something, that she was potentially, had some level of autism, because she just wanted to see, let's see if someone else recognises. And I think sort of straight away the maths tutor says, just out of interest, have you had her checked? And she said, yes, I have. So it's almost like these almost additional clarifications, but never has she mentioned to me in terms of like the EHC. So again, there's going to be things that people are hearing that are probably sat there thinking, I had no idea, and especially if they've not been given the support.
Well, there are a lot of, there are a push by certain councils now to have children with autism in mainstream school.
Right.
And is that
a good thing or a bad thing, do you think?
I personally have reservations with it.
Right. Why?
I mean, this is a weird way of saying it, but so every year I got roped into being Santa.
Right.
At my daughter's school and my son's school.
Yeah.
And I went into my daughter's school, and there are some kids in the early years, and they shouldn't be in a mainstream school. They need
the one-on-one.
Yeah. The reason, we, as I say, we tried Eddie in a mainstream nursery, and we knew pretty quickly. You talked about the confirmation from another person, and that's what we got from the teacher. And so we knew, right, okay, special school route. Because if you don't, the one advice I would say is don't hesitate. If you think the special school route is the right way to go, don't hesitate about it, because it's a lot harder. If you start in mainstream, it's a lot harder to switch to special school once they've started in mainstream. Once they're in mainstream, it's harder. Don't ask me why, but it's a harder process. Because I suppose the question might be, well, they're already in mainstream school, so why do we need to move them? Yeah. But yeah, there's a push. There seems to be a push to get more children with certain needs into mainstream school. Part of the argument for it would be to integrate them with other children and see how they get on socially, emotionally, and that sort of thing. But the not so good end of the scale of that is, and it was the worry that we had, and it's the experience that my wife has seen in certain schools, that Eddie might, if we put him in a mainstream school, he might have been taken out the class and just taught in a room to the side with one teacher, and he wouldn't have then got the social skills. Now he's in a very small class. I think there's 7 or 8 kids with 2 or 3 teachers and assistants. Yeah, it's perfect. So from a developmental perspective, then you would also say, because I mean, you've just mentioned it, there may be some parents that think, right, I'm going to send them to the mainstream school so that they get the opportunity to almost be, I don't even want to say the word normal, but, to have the same kind of upbringing and education, and that it will maybe, I don't know, put them one step ahead when it comes to sort of further down the line in life. But then you've got others who might say, well, if they can get that more one-on-one in a more special school, is that going to help them to develop quicker and further than putting them in the mainstream? I can totally understand why a parent would want their child to go to a mainstream school. Yeah. Because of what we talked about at the start of that's just where you go. That's the route you take. You go to, you especially if you've got siblings, they go to the same school, and that's the route you take. It's hard to adjust your mind, and you have to do it quickly as well, to say, right, okay, we've been thrown this curveball and let's go down the special school route. Whatever parents decide, it's ultimately up to them. That that it's full respect to whatever parent decides is best for their child, because that's the way it should be. But yeah, I think you have to. At the time, looking back, would I have wanted Eddie to go to a mainstream school? Yes, of course, that was where I wanted to go. But I very quickly adjusted to, okay, these are his needs. He will cope better in a special school.
And you're comfortable now that you know you've made the right decision for him?
100%. Because he's not going to, and I don't want to sound negative when I say this, but he's not going to, he's not going to get lots of GCSEs in maths and English and whatever. He's not going to. He won't sit exams like that. He doesn't need to. What Eddie needs and what we want from for him, and I don't like to look too far ahead, I have to say.
That was going to be one of my questions to you.
Yeah, I don't like to look too far ahead, but the ultimate thing we want for him is to live as an independent life as possible.
Yeah.
Whether that's if he does get a job of some sort and he can do something, we've talked about. He likes being outside in a garden, and he loves going to zoos and farms and things. Although we did take him a few months ago to for a horse riding thing, and he wasn't so keen on that. He likes looking at them, but but when they're up close, maybe not. But so yeah, maybe part of that idea. But just as an independent life as possible. That's all you can really wish for, and I think that's whether it's special needs or a child of, as you said, normal abilities. And
I didn't mean it like that.
No,
but in terms of what
I know you.
No,
I did. I know you didn't mean it like that at all. Because I was just struggling for the same thing. What do you say? But we know, what we mean. Yeah, all you ultimately want is them to have the best life possible.
Yeah.
My dream for Eddie would have been that he got married and he carries on the Hermon name and he goes to the football and enjoys that sort of thing. He has been to a football game.
How was that?
Which was an amazing experience for me, selfishly, as a parent, because that was a bit of a dream to take him. So Wolves have, and a lot of clubs have it. I know West Bromwich Albion have it, and Aston Villa have it as well. They have a sensory room in their stadiums where children can go if they're not so comfortable in, because there's a loud atmosphere and noise. Yeah. If they're not so comfortable there, then they can go in this. I think effectively most of them are converted executive boxes.
Right, okay, yeah.
But they've turned them into little sensory rooms, and the Wolves one was brilliant. There were lots of different. They tailor-made it for
with colours and different and textures and
different sort of toys and light up things and sensory toys and the woman Laura who organised it does an amazing job. She asked, is there anything that Eddie likes or any specific interests he's got, and we can sort of tailor make the room for him. There was another child as well, which is fine, and it was a great experience. It was a 0-0 draw, so that was a shame. But and I don't think Eddie was really that bothered, to be honest. Like I said, but for me selfishly, it was a nice thing to kind of tick off and. Yes. I won't take him back, I don't think, because, as I said, he's not really bothered.
Yeah. But it was nice for you to have that kind of bonding experience.
And it was nice to be able to have that moment, because it was a moment that I didn't think I would have. But yeah, apologies for going off track.
No, that's all right. I mean, in terms of, I was going to ask, do you find then, and you kind of answered it, that you live more in the present when it comes to him? And do you think the reason why you don't necessarily look too far ahead is that more so to manage your expectations?
I don't know about expectations, more just, I think if I look too far ahead, it would scare me. Right. Because going back to the grieving process, I was, there's a woman that I follow on Instagram who she's got an autistic child who's 13. She lives in America. And she was saying the other day that when you get to 13, when he got to 13, she went through another grieving process because, when you become a teenager, that's quite a significant life event. And
the hormones are still working exactly the same
way. In terms of not looking too far ahead, I'm not looking forward to the moment where I'm going to have to help Eddie shave.
Right. Okay.
Things like that. It's little silly things like that people don't generally think about, But yeah, we're going to have to do that. We have had very brief conversations about, because there are some really good assisted living places, but would Eddie cope in an assisted living place? Obviously, they are marshaled 24/7, but would he still cope in a place on his own? We don't know yet. We don't know. We're kind of like brief conversations we've had are, we might have to move house at some point and make sure that there's like an annex or something that Eddie can have, so he would live with us.
Sort of standalone living, but at the same time that you're able to be there to support.
A level of independence, but he's there and we're reassured that he's there.
Yeah.
And then obviously there's the really scary thought of when we're gone, he will still be here.
Well, God forbid that's going to be a very long time to come yet, but I understand.
Yeah. And it will be a burden on his sister. And that's a sad thing. We've got a really close friend who her sister's got special needs, and she's talked to us about it is a struggle. And growing up for her, she grew up as the sister of a child with special needs, and it was difficult for her because she perhaps didn't get the attention that you'd expect because it's so time consuming.
Yeah.
I'd like to think Isla doesn't think like that, because I think we do try our best with both of them, and Isla's brilliant.
Are they close? Because that again, I was going to come on to Isla as well in terms of the sort of the sibling dynamic.
Yeah, they are. I mean, they kind of.
And she understands.
Yeah, she does. Yeah, she understands that he's got autism, and like for a long time it was just he's got speech and language difficulties. Now obviously autism, and I think autism is becoming, there's a lot more awareness of it, which is great. But as we've also discussed, autism is very different. I always say myself that
it's not one size fits all.
No, and we're all on the spectrum somewhere. All of us are. It just there are different scales to it.
Yeah.
But in terms of Isla and Eddie, they get on great.
Does she have her own way? I mean, is she able to communicate with him? When I say in her own way, that probably sounds like a silly question, but in terms of like a brother-sister dynamic, have they got a way between them where you can see that there's something sweet there, or is it again he's just exactly the same with her as he is with yourself and Kate? No,
I'd like to think there's that brother-sister dynamic. It's really sweet. She'll help him out. I posted a video a couple of weeks ago of like Isla giving him a piggyback, and just indicate that, or they're hugging, or he likes hugs.
So he doesn't mind the contact then?
No, yeah, he loves contact. I think again that sensory thing of the pressure. He probably likes a hug because of the sort of pressure points. So yeah, he loves a hug, which is good, and loves a hug off his sister, and he does know that it's his sister. Going back to Makaton, sister, he knows that. You say who's that, Eddie, and he'll say sister, and what's your sister's name? Isla, and so he knows her name, and there is that dynamic. Yes, it's different, but Isla's brilliant.
And what about your family and your sort of support functions from yourself and Kate? Was it also when you had to have that conversation with, let's say, your parents or your sister to say, listen, Eddie's been diagnosed with autism, or did they notice things as well and sort of point it out to you? Or how did that all work, and what were the dynamics of that in terms of them being there to support you?
My mother-in-law has been a massive support. So she lives closest to us, and she helps out with the school run because my wife works in a school, so she's got to go off early to her own work. And so it tends to be me and my mother-in-law who do the school run, because again, that's the other adjustment, that we've got two children in schools 7 miles apart.
Yeah.
Because Eddie, where his special school is 7 miles away from us. So it's not, and we opted not to do. You can do transport. You can get a taxi, organised through the council. We didn't want to do that. Because if we could manage it and do it ourselves, we wanted to do it. And B, there have been some horror stories of very rare accounts, but there have been horror stories of children being dropped off at the wrong school.
Well, okay, yeah.
So yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah.
We'll sort it ourselves. Yeah. But yeah, in terms of the support we've received from family members, like I said, my mother-in-law has been great because she's helped out with the school run. I think my parents and Kate's parents collectively, it's not a conversation we've actually had, which sounds a bit strange.
Really?
I don't think we've ever sat down and sort of talked about it. Like, when did you start to think that Eddie was maybe a bit different? It's not a conversation we've had, which sounds a bit strange. In terms of the, I think everybody went through, again, going back to that grieving process, I think everybody probably went through that period, but it's not something that we've spoke about, which might sound a bit strange.
Liam, I'm going to ask you now as well, if you don't mind, because we've just been talking about especially siblings. So obviously it's your eldest brother, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So your eldest brother is a high functioning with autism.
Yeah.
So how was that for you then growing up? And did you feel that you lacked the attention that you would have wanted, or did you have to sort of grow up a lot quicker than what you maybe would have done had that not been the case?
Well, it's weird because, like, when I think of memories when I was young, I don't have any with him. That was when he was quite severe at that point, so he was quite struggled quite a lot. So mainly in his own room, that sort of thing. He used to get very aggressive though. I remember a few times like he would lash out and attack me and my brother Dylan. But it's weird, as we've both grown up, me and my other brother Dylan's kind of gone a different way, so he still doesn't accept the fact that Carl's got autism.
Really?
Yeah, he'll get mad at him and he'll think, oh, he's lazy or ignorant, and he's gone a separate way. Whereas I don't know, I feel like I've bonded with Carl much more and more accepting.
Have you had that conversation with Dylan to ask why?
Loads of times. He just doesn't get it. He doesn't put the effort in to understand, and it's more common than you'd think. Like the lady I talked to both of you about, her mum doesn't understand either. Whole family doesn't understand. They see it as that's just her.
And you just to sort of again just to offer perspective, the lady that you're referring to has got 2 young sons who are both. Did you say they were both non-verbal at one stage?
Oh yes, that's a different lady. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but she's got two little boys with autism, and absolutely golden. But her partner left her because of the autism.
Really?
Yeah.
Which is what I said earlier in terms of the effects that sometimes it can have on relationships.
But I know a lot of families, they don't accept the autism part. They see it as that's just them being them. That's just that individual being unique, or that individual being that individual, rather than kind of painting the lines and saying this individual's acting this way because they have autism.
Yeah. How
can we sort of address this issue, or they're having a meltdown? Why are they having it? Rather than, oh, it's just them being them.
Right.
And I feel like that's also how my brother Dylan sees him. He sees it as, oh, Kyle's just Kyle. Leave him be. Leave him to himself. I just avoid it. Rather than trying to help and support and be involved, it's more just leave it.
And what about would you say the EHC? Is this stuff that you're aware of?
I've had that myself.
Really?
Yeah, for the anxiety. But my eldest brother, he just stopped school in year 5, and then didn't go through no schooling for about 5 years. Then he had home tutoring, which was paid for by the government as well. So yeah, but my mum she had to stop work completely.
Right.
So she was a hairdresser. She cut your dad's
Yes,
hair.
which we didn't realise when we started. And Liam one day was like, Liam, any chance I've heard you're good with the camera. Can you do some editing? And then was it a couple of sort of conversation later. He's like, oh, by the way, my mum used to cut your dad's hair when I was like 6 or 7. So it's just completely off topic. But yeah, so yes, I know that she used to be a hairdresser. Very good hairdresser as well. She was indeed.
She doesn't cut my hair.
Although my dad's got no hair left now. He's got a little bit on the side. So hopefully that's nothing to do with how she used to trim it.
Yeah, she had to quit her job. She was making quite a lot of money at the time as well, so the income from that side just changed.
And that was to become his full-time carer?
Yeah. So she's on the carer's benefits, and we get person independent payment for Kyle. But my real dad left a little bit similarly as well, so obviously the stress with Kyle, that was before I was born, he'd left.
Is that why?
Other factors, but obviously he... You know, we kind of think that's also he got the autism from that side.
Right.
Because there's many huge traits from him. And my mum feels guilty as well because autism is largely genetic. It's not really something that, so it's somewhere in the bloodline where it's come from. My mum feels extremely guilty about it. She always goes on about how it's her fault and that's 23 years down the line, and it is hard, and obviously I feel when I have kids, there's a high likelihood that my kids will have autism. So there's also a huge fear, a huge fear element. But
there was
like what you were saying, when you see them little milestones, there's nothing sweeter. Honestly, like when you were talking about, I was tearing up back here. I was being a white puff. It's so sweet because it's innocence and it's just different. It really like the love you have in your heart for it. It's when you see them little milestones. It's incredible.
It's interesting what you say about the bloodline and your mom having an element of guilt. Not that it's anybody's fault, but it's a question I've asked myself. Like, where has it come from? Because as far as we're aware, there's not
on either side.
No, not that we. No.
Really?
No one diagnosed with autism, that's for sure. Although I think, as we've talked about, I think there's more awareness of it and there are more people being diagnosed with it because of the awareness. And I spoke to you about someone that I know who was in their 40s who got diagnosed. I have to admit, and I've never said this out loud before, but I've thought about myself, like, are there certain traits that I've got that, could I have an element of autism? Maybe I might do, and I have contemplated maybe looking into it, but I know it would be a long process, so I'm kind of thinking, well, is it worth it?
Really?
Yeah.
One of the facts that I had when I was searching it was it's believed in the UK every 3 children or adults that are diagnosed with autism, there's another 2 that have autism but haven't been diagnosed.
Wow.
So imagine that's like 10. Let's say 30 people have been diagnosed with autism. 20 more people haven't been diagnosed but are highly believed to have autism.
As you've just said that now, I'm wondering if it was someone said to me, and I wonder if it was my best mate when they were doing these particular tests, or was it you? That there's like different scales, or there's different. Is it you? And there's different ages, or there's something in terms of the tests that can be picked up at a certain age with. Is it with the boys before it's picked up with the girls?
Girls are better at masking it.
Is that what it was?
By all accounts, girls are better at masking their autism than boys. So there are more boys, I think, diagnosed sooner than girls.
Right.
I don't know that for a fact, but I have read and heard about that. Because they are better at hiding it. And yeah, I think, a lot of us probably, not to get onto a wider debate, but a lot of us probably hide a lot of personality traits that we've got in certain social situations. But it does make you think. As I say, it's a wider spectrum than you think. On the diagnosis process, I was going to tell you about this because we didn't really chase a diagnosis as such. We knew that Eddie had special needs and we knew his main issue was speech and language. But in terms of the autism diagnosis, that didn't come until November 2021.
Right.
So 6 years old by that point. So that wasn't a rushed thing. I know there's I've heard of a lot of parents who've had their child diagnosed at 2 and 3. But yeah, Eddie was 6. We didn't really chase the diagnosis, but we were kind of we'd gone through lots of pediatric appointments, and eventually he got to the point where they said, yes, we're going to refer him to CAMS, the Children and Adult Mental Health Service, who deal with autism diagnosis. And not helped by the pandemic, but because the first conversation we had was actually the week after the lockdown in the garden, when you remember that, when it was really beautiful weather that week. We were out in the garden, and my wife had a 1-hour conversation with the person from CAMS and asking all sorts of questions. But then we didn't hear from them for, I think it was almost a year.
Really?
So that was March, April 2020. Next time we heard from them was March, April 2021. And again, because of COVID, it was still very much a at distance process, and they had to change a few things. And I then had 3 conversations in back-to-back weeks where she'd constantly go, she'd say, so did Eddie do this? Does Eddie do this? And did he do it when he was 2 years old? And I was like, well, I don't know, I'll have to remember. And I asked her after the first conversation, I said, what are you going to ask me next week? I said, because then I can actually think about it. Because I've got lots of videos of the sort of charties.
So you're documenting the
in a way,
well,
because it's nice to look back at. It makes you realise how much progress is made when you look back at these videos. So I said, I've got all these videos. What are you going to ask me next week? Because I can look at all these videos, and I can definitely tell you whether he did this thing when he was 2 and he's doing it now. The worst part of the process of the diagnosis was we went to this medical centre, and he doesn't like medical centres because I think he associates them with jabs and things. So as soon as he enters one, he thinks that that's what's going to happen. But yeah, we went into this medical centre, so he was on edge a bit. And it was the worst. It was a horrible part of the process because we were basically sat in this room with these toys that they got from like the 1970s, like toys he's not interested in at all. But apparently there had to be these toys because that's the way they do the test. And they watched us through glass, so they watched me interact with Eddie through
I've seen
through a
this
glass
in,
window.
Films and on
TV, we had to do that, and it was horrible. I hated it because I just felt like we were both being judged. So that wasn't a nice process. And then fast forward a few months, you then again, it was still COVID situation, so we had a Zoom call with the woman from CAMS who basically came on and said, so yes, we've looked through all the reports, and yes, we are satisfied that it's a diagnosis of autism. And I went, okay, because I wasn't surprised. And my first question was, okay, so what happens now then? And she kind of like paused for a bit and went, nothing really. And I was like, do you not get referred to anywhere else, or is there not any like support like to help us? Because again, it was another part of that grieving process where you're told something. As I say, I wasn't surprised that he got that diagnosis, but it was still confirmation of it, so it was still difficult. And I was expecting, there's this support group that you can go to, or there's that support group, or and he was like, no, nothing. I was like,
you were just nodding as well, so this all makes sense to you.
Yeah. And I've been through a similar thing. Obviously I had the autism test and everything until probably about touching 16, so only about 2 years ago when I had the test and that, and it is the same thing. And I can say it because I don't really care, but the system is extremely poor. Not because of the workers' faults, but because of the way the system is. It's underfunded, and even one of the facts I was looking up, it said like there was 160,000 inquiries and everything for the diagnosis of autism, and it is the system to try and you chasing. I don't know if you find it, you're chasing appointments, chasing all the time. If you don't do the chasing with anything to do with special needs, whether it's the EHC plan, whether it's a diagnosis, whether it's
anything, any appointment, if the parent doesn't chase it, the person involved doesn't chase it, nothing happens.
You have to be as proactive
You
as
have
they
to
come.
be. You have, and that's why, like, because I think sometimes you can see. I think some people from the outside looking in probably look at a special needs parent and think that they're quite bitter and twisted and angry and I mean, there's an element probably we are, but I think we've been made to feel that way because you're ignored and you're kind of left to fester and left to kind of sort it out yourself. It's not right. And I think, again, the worst thing is you just want empathy.
Yeah.
You want understanding. You want someone to understand. You don't want people to just, you want empathy, but you don't want pleasantries at the same time. You don't just want,
Even if they don't have the answers, to at least have that level of empathy to say, listen, I don't have the answer to this, but I'm going to help you find out. Simple as. And you just don't have that. I mean, are there any, for people who are going through stuff, are there any organisations that you do rate, or whether it's any charities, or is there something that for you, you're like, out of this whole process, do you know what? These people have been a godsend. Because you haven't even touched upon the fact that you started doing your 10Kers and half marathons and all that kind of stuff to help to sort of raise money and raise awareness for this. So is that for a particular organisation that has been a bit of a backbone for you?
So the running. So the running came from, first of all, not from speech and language. I initially started running because I had a close friend who passed away. And one of my friends who was a runner said, how do you fancy doing this 10K, the Black Country 10K that was coming up in 2022, it was, July 2022. And he said, how do you fancy doing it? And at the time, I didn't want to say no to him because our close friend had passed away and it was very difficult. So I didn't want to say no, so I said yes. And then, so that run, we raised money for Bliss, which is which supports premature babies and parents, because our friend who passed away had a premature child, so we raised money for that charity. Yeah. But then I got the running bug, which I think people, if you are someone who runs, you'll understand that, because you start to go, oh, well, if I can run it in that time, I can do it in that time. And anyway, so I got the bug, and I'd always had at the back of my mind that I wanted to give back. And so I chose Speech and Language UK was the charity. And in the back of my mind, I'd done a couple of 10Ks by that point. And I thought, well, I mean, obviously the big challenge is a marathon, but as we discussed before we started recording, no way. I'm not doing a marathon. Fair play to anyone who does it, but I haven't got the time to train for one. But I applaud anyone who's done it. I went for a half marathon. So I did the Birmingham half marathon in May 2023. And it was hard.
Isn't that still that's still 20 odd
13.1 miles.
Miles. Is it still 20 odd and just in kilometres? Is it like nearly 26 kilometres?
Yeah. No. It's two 10.
My knees just said no.
Or 21 kilometres maybe. Is it 2 10Ks?
Is that what it is?
Just over.
Right.
But
one's enough, thank you.
Yeah. 21. So there you go. So it's when you first do a 10K, if someone said to you, right, you've got to do another one. Yeah. But anyway, I told
you, throw me out of a plane. I'll do it for air ambulance or whatever it is. Chuck me out of a plane, as long as obviously I've got a parachute. I'm sure there's some people probably chuck me out of a plane without a parachute. At the same time, I'd happily do that. But the thought of doing a marathon, my brain just says, no.
I didn't. As I said, I got the running bug, but it was very time consuming with the training. But genuinely, I know it sounds cheesy to say, but because I had the cause in mind, and the support that I was getting, so by the end of it, so I did the Wolverhampton 10K, I did a 10-mile run from Tamworth to Lichfield, I did the half marathon, and then I did another 10K. In the September last year, and I raised £4,500.
Amazing.
I say I raised, we raised as in, because people donated. Yeah. So it wasn't me, but
well done.
it was genuinely seeing that go up and up and up as people were, I had little targets.
Yeah.
My initial target was probably £1,000, and I thought that was enough. But yeah, as it kept going up and up and up, I was, it just pushes you to keep going. And I do and again, going back to those targets, at the back of my mind, I'm like, I want to do something else because I want to get to 5,000 if I can, but I don't want to run a marathon.
Yeah.
So I need to think of something else.
Something.
Yeah, think of something else for me.
We'll get our heads together and come up with something good.
Because I do want to give back, because they do, Speech and Language UK. I've done a few events for them and things, and done a few talking events for them, and they do a lot of great work. They've got a couple of schools. One of them's in Nottingham, I know, which is a special speech and language school. And so they do a lot of amazing work. The Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists, they've been great as well. I've spoken at a lot of things for them. And they gave me an award, which was nice, a couple of years ago, a Giving Voice Award for sort of raising awareness.
Yeah.
And yeah, so they do an amazing work locally. I've not delved into, because I've gone so down the rabbit hole of speech and language, I've not delved into the wider sort of autism charities. I know there are a lot of good autism charities
Do you know of any?
locally and across the country.
To be fair, mine as a family, we never really just dealt with it.
Yeah.
We never really reached out. I think that was not wanting to have to reach out for help.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just, you feel more comfortable to just get on with it and do it
Yeah.
yourself. But
And
there is nothing comes to mind, but there is quite a lot of good autism, or National Autistic Society. I think that's the main one.
Yeah.
I think there is an Autism West Midlands as well, locally. As I mentioned, from a wider special needs perspective, I mentioned earlier We Love Carers, which is based at the Mary Stevens Centre in Stourbridge. They're really good. Even just for they do a lot of great things for children and young people with special needs, but also for the parents.
Yeah.
Because it is, as we've discussed throughout this, I think, try and find those groups. If you are feeling like you are alone, try and find the groups, because you will immediately find someone who understands what you're going through. There was a parent at my son's school, and he said something which really resonated with me, where he said, when you're first adjusting to it, he said, you go down the park, and he said it's a bit like, he said, you're with, because he's got a son as well, and he said it's a bit like, if you're down the park, it's a bit like you're in a glass case with your son, and they're doing their own thing, they're in their own little world, and you're watching all the other children through this glass case. Right. So you're you do feel separated, and that you're in your own little world. And that's the world that you, again, it's going back to that grieving thing. Yeah. That's the world that you wished you were part of. Yeah. But again, like I said, that goes away, because to ask that question again, would I change Eddie? Absolutely not, because he is who he is. Yeah. He's got an amazing personality. He's so happy, so smiley, so bubbly. I wouldn't change him for the world.
And he's part of the reason why you've been shaped into the fabulous, I use that word again, man that you are today as well. Not to say that you weren't before, but surely the experiences that you have help to shape you as you grow. Yeah.
It does change you, and I'd like to think for the better, because I said this to someone yesterday, it opens your eyes to so many different things. Selfishly, unless you're in that special needs world, you don't really think about it. But now, I've got a much wider perspective of struggles that some people have in life. And as I've said as well, our situation with Eddie, it could be a lot worse. There are lots of situations that are a lot worse. So we have to be grateful for the situation that we're in. Yes, it's different. And I wish sometimes that, there were, whether it's friends or colleagues, I wish that they understood a bit better, because it is hard to explain unless you're going through it.
Did you mind me asking you on this today? Is it
No,
Is it a good thing or a bad thing that because I'm little Miss Nosy Parker anyway. I'm inquisitive, but I always like to learn. And as I said, if I can learn something from this, and in the hope that other people listening can do the same, is it a nice thing for you to have a colleague or a friend who wants to know more?
Yeah, I think selfishly, it's quite cathartic to be able to talk about it. Okay. And if someone's managed to listen to all of this, then
people do, believe it or not.
No, I'm sure they do. I'm sure they do. It's not a knock on. It's not a knock on you. It's more. I know I've rambled a lot and talked about a lot of things, but there's so much. There's so much that we've experienced, and a lot of it might go over some people's heads because, like I said, unless you're living it, it's hard to fully understand. But hopefully, it's cathartic for me to get certain things off my chest.
Okay.
But hopefully I've not come across as, like I said as well, a bitter sort of parent or person.
No.
You've
been honest, and that's all that I and anyone could ask, and that's what this is all about. Is that people can just you come in, you wear your heart on your sleeve, and like I said, there's going to be a lot of people who feel the same. You mentioned as well in terms of perspective. So before I let you go, then I've got my 5 key questions I like to ask everybody. Don't be scared. It's nothing too intense. But first and foremost, how do you define happiness, and how has it evolved over time?
Blimey. How do you define happiness?
Yeah, for you.
Going for the cheesy answer, I suppose, going back to the smile on Eddie's face and Isla's face. If they're happy, I'm happy.
Yeah.
So if it's as simple as that, I would say that defines happiness for me. Yeah.
And what are your key factors that you would say contribute to happiness? Where some people might be relationships, money, success, wealth, but for you, what are those key factors?
I think now I'm in a place work-wise where I am doing my dream job, so that helps with happiness, because I think work is such a big part of your life. You spend more time at work than at home most of the time, so if you've got that bit right, then that certainly helps towards happiness, and I'm very happy doing what I'm doing there. And I think as long as we're all happy at home as well. And I think, as I say, it's probably cheesy, but I think as long as the kids are happy, I think me and Kate are happy. As long as they're living the best life that they possibly can and getting the experiences, because that's the one thing that we've tried to do. We've tried to carry on as, that word again, normal. With Eddie, we've not shied away from going on trips and going to the zoos and going to safari parks and going to different things. Meals out, we've probably done less because sometimes that can be quite hard. But not as hard as we probably make it out. It's probably the thought of doing it that is harder than actually the reality. But yeah, that's as long as they're happy and
and you're happy.
Yes.
When facing challenging times, how do you overcome adversity, and how has that helped to shape your perspective on life?
As we've discussed, I think one thing that I'm not good at, I bottle things up quite a lot. So like I said, it's quite nice to come on here, and it's quite cathartic to be able to talk about stuff, because I don't tend to talk, because I don't have a close
or an outlet
friend, or there isn't an outlet for me to talk about the things that I'm feeling and thinking, because if you're not, unless you're going through it, it's difficult to understand. So in terms of how I handle it, I'm probably guilty of bottling it up, and what I would say is to other people, don't do that. So that would be my answer to that question. Don't bottle things up, because if you do speak about things, you will feel a lot better. So that's probably how I deal with it.
How important do you consider maintaining your well-being and overall self-care to be?
I think it's very important, whether I do it very well or not is another question. I think the running has helped.
Yeah.
I do genuinely think that has helped. It's fallen off a cliff a little bit in the last year, so I need to get back to it. I need to book myself an event. I need to book something to work towards.
Like I said, well, we're going to do that. We've already said that with that 5K.
Yeah, exactly.
5,000 you're going to be raising funds towards, but yeah.
Yeah. So well-being, it's massively important. Yeah. I should get more sleep. Really, I should try and get more sleep, but I'm too busy playing on Xbox at the moment.
Are you a gamer?
Do you know what? I was when I grew up as a kid, and I bought an Xbox last November. I think I was trying to relive my youth. I was maybe going through a midlife crisis or something. I don't know.
Are you a gamer?
Yeah, on a computer.
So
Yeah.
what's your game of choice?
Well, I keep
all
saying
these things I've learned about Steve.
I
Known
keep-
you all this time and I didn't even know.
so. I played Grand Theft Auto 5, even though it got released about 15 years ago.
Is that Vice? Is it Vice City? Is that 6?
That was time ago.
Yeah.
GTA 5 is the most recent one, isn't it?
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
That shows
It was
how
good.
old I am.
I've completed it.
Have you?
It was good. And mainly, I keep saying FIFA, but it's not FIFA anymore. It's EA 24, the football game.
Right.
So I'm playing that. So I'm spending too much time.
Eating,
playing on
sleeping,
that.
and breathing football.
I'm going through a midlife crisis. What can I say? I just can't.
It's all those
I can't
games
afford.
down at West Brom. That's what it is.
I can't afford a Ferrari. That's the only thing.
Not yet. Finally, what's your go-to song? If there's a song that lifts your spirits, whether it's a day where you're just not feeling it, you're in a funk, or you think, I just need to put on a piece of music that you know can instantly put you in a good mood, what's your go-to track?
So I have a couple of favourite bands, which are Need to Breathe, which is a band from America.
Right. What kind of music?
They're a Christian rock band.
Oh, okay.
And I'm not really a man of faith, I have to admit, but they're really good.
Right.
So they have a song called Happiness, which is quite a good uplifting song, and there's a gospel element to it.
Nice.
Reef is another one of my favourite bands, but the song I would pick, and it's not necessarily uplifting as such, but it's just on the theme of what we've been talking about. I adopted it as the sort of anthem of my running and to raise money for Speech and Language UK, and it's a song called Walk by the Foo Fighters.
Love the Foo.
Yeah, because
You don't know Foo? You know the Foo Fighters.
what? Unbelievable.
Let me go and get my Foo Fighters hoodie and make you wear it for the next episode. Foo Fighters. You'll know some Right, when we've finished, I'll put on some, and I'll put it on loud as well. Yeah.
You
Gotta
will
love
know.
the Foo.
But yeah, Foo Fighters Walk, because there's the line in there, there's learning to walk again, learning to talk again, and so it kind of became in my head the sort of anthem for the speech and language journey. And it was a song that as soon as I heard it, years before deciding to do the fundraising, it was a song that resonated with me. And I think not necessarily filled me with happiness at times. There have been tears listening to it at times because it's been a tough time, but it has become uplifting because of the journey that we've been on.
Brilliant. Love it. Liam, before I close this off, have you got any questions for... have I covered everything?
I've got two.
Go on.
Just two. You mentioned a little bit about the trips, but like about holidays, have you been able to go abroad? Because I know that's a huge thing as well. There's planning, and do you find you have to plan the trips and sort of let him know what you're doing and where you're going, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so in terms of... So Eddie's really good with traveling and journeys, and because I know there are some autistic children that if you change your route on the way to school, that can really set them off. Eddie's fine with that, so we're very fortunate in terms of that respect. He doesn't mind a change of routine, so we don't have to prep him in that way. And yeah, we have travelled. We go to Portugal a fair bit, which is like a 3-hour flight, so it's not that bad. We did go to Florida pre-pandemic 2019. That was a bit stressful, more so for Kate than me, because I think she stresses more about the flights and things, and I choose to be laid back about it. But the stressful bit was obviously because it's a 9-hour flight, and about 4 hours in, he wanted to get off. Because I think before he'd done, like I said, flights to Portugal that were like 3 hours. So I think in his head he was like, right, I'm done now. Right, it's time to get off. And seriously, we're over the Atlantic, and he gets his bag, and he's like, no. Like he wanted to get off that plane, and that was quite a scary 10 minutes. Trying to convince him that no, we've still got 3.5 hours to go. Yeah, so. But it hasn't stopped us, and I think that's the thing. I think there's quite a social consciousness. I think that us as families, and I don't know whether you can agree with this, but as families, we're probably more conscious of it than other people are. Yes. I think it's more of an awareness and uncomfortable from our perspective than other people's perspective. Mm-hmm. But as Eddie's got older and his needs have become more aware to the wider world, I couldn't care less what other people think, to be honest with you. I genuinely don't. If someone's got a problem with him, that's their problem. Yeah. He's happy as Larry. If you've got an issue, that's your problem.
Yeah.
The only other one was, I know you mentioned your mother-in-law, but what about your parents, and how do they deal with, because obviously they still want the relationship with the grandson, but how did you have to kind of educate them as well, or were they already sort of, on board with the sort of...
So my mum works in the NHS. She was a trained midwife and now does lots of other roles within the NHS. So I suppose she had a level of awareness of needs, which helps. My dad's been brilliant. Again, it's not a conversation with her. I'm going to have this conversation now about what they thought and when they went through it, because it's not a conversation we've sat down and had, really.
Do you reckon they'll listen to this episode?
I hope so. Yeah. I think everyone should.
There we go.
But
that's it, job done.
Yeah, absolutely. There's the promo. But it's not a conversation we had. But I suppose looking back, I think they handled it as best they could. My mum and dad live a bit further away than Kate's mum and dad. Not that far at all. It's only like a half an hour down the road. But so that in terms of like the school run and things, they've helped out where they can. Yeah. But it's not as easy. But without having that conversation with them, I think everybody in our family has handled it as best they could. I think that the person who probably found it the hardest was my wife's nan, who's she's still around, and bless her. And I guess for someone of her generation, it was definitely less prevalent. I mean, I don't know if you saw a month or two back, there was the row about the councillors in Warwickshire. I think it was Warwickshire County Council, where
not with the mom. Who had the 5 children.
No, it was the councillors who, one of them misspoke, and he said, well, back in the day, they used to just put them in hospitals. And it's just like, going back to it's something I said about earlier about those old-fashioned views. I think it was probably more difficult for that generation of the family, because it wasn't people. Yeah, because it's quite funny, isn't it? People used to say, "Oh, it was never really a thing when I was young." But no, it was a thing. It was just that everyone was discarded and not helped and supported. The reason why there's more awareness of autism is because people are getting the help that they need, and there is more awareness of it, which is
but more help is also needed.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, we always want more. Everyone wants more in life.
Mm-hmm. Any more? Any more for any more? Was that painless?
Was it for you?
Listen, like I said, I've been wanting to speak to you for a while because you sit close to my heart, and I think that hopefully not only has it been cathartic for you today, but for people who again are watching or listening, that someone, at least a couple of people can think, I'm so glad that she got Steve on, and that you'll have helped to put a lot of other people's minds at rest. So for that, I'm very, very grateful.
That's all right. I think it's like what you said about sort of the going on before about when you asked me to do the Wellness Wednesday. I'm like, really? Like, yeah, it's one of them weird things. I don't know. If it does help someone, brilliant. Yeah, that'd be great. But I don't really think about it that wider.
Well, Steve Hermon, you are amazing. For yourselves at home, then I know you're going to sit there. You don't. You can keep them off. You're all right.
Sorry, I thought.
I know we sat and thought. I thought we were finished. We're not finished yet.
I'm so sorry.
Got to do my big sign off, Steve.
Sorry, I'm so sorry.
I've got to do the old like, follow, subscribe.
Can you edit that?
No, that's definitely staying in. That would be on the
I'm
old
so
blue. No,
sorry.
that's all right.
I thought we were
Thinking,
finished.
oh, my coffee's gone cold now. Good, I can have a sip.
It's very cold, but it's still lovely.
I'll make you a fresh one. Yes. Again, for yourselves at home, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And I hope you've enjoyed today's episode of Nattabox. As always, don't forget to like, follow or subscribe. And in the meantime, take care of yourselves and see you on the next episode. Bye for now.